Here we go. Hello and welcome to the webinar on the new ambition for the development sector. It is hosted by Concord. My name is Morten Ronnenberg. I'm facilitator and moderator for this event. Concord has started a process on what we call a political narrative, which is going to be a description of and a discussion of how we see the future of the development sector. And for this purpose, we are doing various sorts of ways to engage people all over the globe in this debate. And this is one new tool for us, and we hope it works out well with you. You're invited to join us in the debate and ask questions along the lines on the chat, and we'll try to pick up as many as possible for the panel during the next hour to 1.5 hours. With us, we have in the panel Ana Rosa Alcalde, Director of Alianza por la Solidaridad.
Good morning to everyone.
And we have Bernd Niles, Director of Citizenship, or Secretary General, I think. And we have Selina Donnelly, Policy Officer in Trocare.
Good morning, everyone.
And Director of Concord, Olivier Consolou.
Hello, bonjour, good morning.
And we also have some technical support with Somos Mas trying to help us out on all these new ways of doing communication across the globe. The agenda today is that, first of all, we'll start off with debating this issue about a new ambition for the development sector, with some hard questions following on. So a few presentations from each of the panelists, then a debate, then the toughest discussion about how realistic is this, where we're going to play the devil's advocate. And you're very welcome to chip in both on the constructive part and on the hard part. And finally, in an hour or so, we're going to wind up and see how this can feed into a future process Concord will drive forward over the next half year and also in the coming years. So welcome and enjoy the debate. And Anna, could you perhaps start with giving your viewpoint on what should be the key concerns of the development sector over the next 5 years?
Thanks, Morten. Well, I would say that 5 years in 2013 is very short term. If I had been asked this question 15 years ago, I would say that what I'm trying to answer for a 5 years time frame is long term or medium term. But for now, I think it's very short term. So our question should go farther. Regarding the 5 year short term key concerns, I would say that having a look at the development agenda, we have concerns regarding the actors, regarding the finance and of development, and regarding the agenda. Regarding the actors, I would say two things that are very important: how to engage emerging economies with a new global development agenda to build consensus, to agree on new rules, on new development models and frames. Second, how to engage private sector as a sound partner for development. In terms of financing, I would say that our key concern will be in the next 5 years how to keep these ODA plus blending mechanisms, new financing initiatives.
And Anna, sorry, you are speaking so fast for all of us.
Sorry, because I only have 2 minutes. So
yeah, but you'll get more time.
Okay.
Please carry on, but not so fast. I can't follow.
Okay. So I say in terms of finance, the main concern for the development agenda will be how to keep the ODA plus debate, the new blending mechanisms, the new financing for development ideas significant enough in terms of amount to be important for the development agenda, and how to really tie them to true development concerns. And in terms of agenda, I think we have to face the 2015 the post-2015 scheme that should focus on inequalities. It should be more green, it should be more universal and more rights-based agenda, and all the debates about fiscal policies at national and global level, and finally, a concern about what will happen in this new agenda with LDCs, countries that have been through long-term forgotten conflicts and fragile states. So this is for me the main concerns at short term, at 5 years. But later on, if I have the chance, I would like to speak specifically how I understand will be the concerns for CSOs, and what do I think we should be focusing on if we think of a longer time frame than 5 years. Thank you, and sorry for speaking so fast.
Well, very good. Thank you. We'll come back to that about the longer perspective, because we definitely need that. Bernd, for the same question, what would be your impression about the key concerns of the development sector over the next, let's say 5 years, but you may extend further if you feel so.
Thanks, Morten. Good morning, everybody. It's a perfect timing for me to speak about this question, because only last week the CITSE Alliance brought its 17 members, Catholic development agencies from all over Europe and North America, together to Brussels and to discuss exactly this question. So from our point of view, we can say on the one hand side, in the past we did a pretty good job. We tried to support in solidarity poor communities. We did a great job in advocacy to lobby governments like the European Commission and our home governments in member states. But at the same time, I think we are losing the battle. We are losing the battle with a view to planetary boundaries, and we have a major power shift in the world, where actually when you look at serious forecasts, the main economies, the main political forces between 2030 and 2050 will completely change. So we will live in a completely different world in the future. And I don't think we are really ready as development civil society organizations for this challenge. So it's a perfect timing to start a discussion now on the question, how do we want to work in the future? Here, I think we need to discuss a kind of narrative or paradigm shift for our future work. We need a discussion. What is exactly our vision? What are the key priorities and values we base our work on? For example, one big question is for civil society organizations for the next years: are we radical enough? Are we really challenging the current economic system, for example, which is very much a GDP growth paradigm? Are we really promoting rights, human rights of people, which is a very tough task? And are we really addressing the #1 issue for the near future is increasing inequalities? So we have more rich people, but we have also less poor people, but we have increasing inequalities. So I think for the next 5 years, we have quite a job to do to transform our own organizations and to redefine our advocacy work as well as our partnership work with poor communities, with partners in the South, who will also have a different role in the future compared to the role they had in the past.
Okay, thanks a lot. That was some very interesting questions, and I think maybe our participants all over are having some of the answers to this. I'm going to question you more on that later. But Selina, what are your concerns for over the next 5 years?
Well, Troker is a member organisation of CITSE. We've been participating in these reflections along with CITSE and some of the pressing questions that he raised. But in short, I believe we need a kind of radical systemic transformation. So we need to urgently focus on addressing political and structural causes of unequal and environmentally unsustainable development. And along with that comes a very meaningful questioning of the model of development that we have been espousing up until now. Trokra actually in 2010 undertook research posing a similar question to provoke discussion around the key issues which would face those working in INGOs in the coming decade. So asking where leading edge will be for agencies like ourselves. The report produced as a result was called Leading Edge 2020, and that identified 5 major and at this point well-established global trends that we need to contend with. The first one won't be a surprise, it's climate change. The second, Anna already touched on, it's shifting geopolitics. The third is demographic change. The fourth, pressure on natural resources. And the fifth is widening inequality. This report, Leading Edge 2020, also identified 10 things that INGOs need to do, but given that we have some time limits, I'll highlight 4 for the purposes of this discussion. I think the first most crucial one is continue to engage with politics and power. So as you'll have seen in the online consultation for this discussion on a new political narrative, our director Justin Kilcullen notes that issues of poverty and exclusion are political issues and you cannot resolve that with technical solutions. So again, I think that challenges us in terms of on the spectrum of NGOs, if you like, even more towards a transformative model. The second kind of element is we've spoken about what kind of narrative we need, but at the essence of this, it's building a culture of solidarity and justice, and perhaps the need for an inspirational or aspirational story which is appealing to people instead of maybe guilting them or overwhelming them, but we can maybe talk about that a bit more later. The third strand, I believe, is engaging with our own societies, so in relation to domestic social justice issues, so working to build a common kind of narrative on which reframes global inequalities in terms of as much about overconsumption in the north and not just around poverty in the south. So we need to focus on well-being and sufficiency of consumption in discussions about social justice issues in the north. And I think finally we kind of also need to continue to be strategic but also more flexible and responsive, because the radical kind of contextual changes of the last 15 years weren't perhaps fully anticipated, and likely, as Anna mentioned again, over the next 10 to 15 or longer term, we probably can't fully anticipate those either.
Okay. That was quite a mouthful and a lot of things to take into concern. So what does Concord think about this, Olivier, and what is your key concern for the next time, the coming years?
Thank you, Morten. Thank you, dear colleagues. Just to start thinking, perhaps thanking the many people that have made contribution to that debate, because at the end of the day, the webinar is a kind of momentum in this longer process, as you said, and that's very appealing to see the kind of excitement that this debate has provoked within Concord constituency and even a little bit beyond with partners and colleagues from different constituencies. So very happy to be there with you. I have the feeling after 10 years being with Concord and 20 years in this so-called development sector that for the first time we are talking about development model. That's incredible to think that we talk about development without never talking about what kind of development we are talking about. So we talk about policies, we talk about cooperation, we talk about solidarity, many things, but not about the model of society we promote through all those policies and instruments. For the first time, the discussion is on the table. And to make it very simple, I think that the question is, what kind of societies, there is no one single model, of course, would allow 7 billion people, inhabitants, in this only planet we have, to live in dignity? This is the main question, without killing the planet. And this question should be at the top of our agenda for the next 5 or 20 years. As Hannah said, 5 years is almost irrelevant for this kind of deep change we call for. And to respond to that important question about which kind of societies could allow 7 billion people to live in relatively satisfying conditions and well-being, as we said, and having their rights respected, the question following this is what kind of democratic institutions, again, not one single, but many, do we need for this to happen? And to get the societies where they are today through a transition to another point in 20, 50 years, max. So the question of democracy is really at the core of all those discussions. And democracy not on the old-fashioned way of looking at it as an exclusive competence of nations, but really at all levels. And that brings to my third point, which is the third challenge I see for our sector in the next 5 to 20 years, which is to articulate local level actors and societies where everything starts. I think this is the most important level. How this articulate to the nations, which are still a reality, and how these bring into regional discussion and international community agenda. And the point here is, what is our role as civil society organizations to contribute to that transition we call for? And finally, I would like to say at that stage as an introduction that perhaps our role is to link much more those levels, because today the system is very geographically in silos. So local authorities, local actors, local politicians used to not really talk with national leadership. National governments are very enclosed in their bubbles, and we can see that in Europe every week. And the international community seems to be another bubble, totally disconnected from even national reality. So civil society, with their wide scope, could help to bring and fulfill the gaps. I stop there, Morten. Okay,
thank you. So we have quite a wide-reaching debate starting already. If there are any of you panelists who have questions to one another, please signal it to me. But first, Anna, you mentioned that you would like to have the opportunity to give it a beyond 5 years perspective, and now your colleagues did. What is your key concern for the longer term? You put your microphone on. Oh, sorry. I don't think we can hear Anna. Hello? We can't hear Anna. Kenny has muted Anna, it says. Okay, let's see if we can then shift. Are we easy? Okay, Anna, can you say something? We can't hear. Okay. I think, if Selina, could you come back to some of your questions then, because we can't hear Anna, unfortunately. You mentioned that we should engage with our own societies, but somebody could actually say, isn't that what we're already doing?
I think, yes, of course we are really already doing it, but kind of maybe more in terms of on the issues on which we're doing it. There was an interesting study conducted in the UK called Finding Frames, which talked a lot about the ways in which INGOs engage with the public on issues of global poverty and injustice. And it kind of unveiled a lot of the kind of intentions inherent in INGOs and how we're structured in terms of communicating for fundraising purposes versus communicating for advocacy purposes, and a lot of the complexities around that. But it also had some really interesting proposals around the value base that we would need to kind of encourage people to have stronger self-transcendent values and more pro-social behaviours that kind of sustain their engagement over time. What I suppose I can give you a tangible example of what I mean by
Very nice.
building alliances. In an Irish context, quite recently, Troca participated in a public consultation and mobilisation event on the post-2015 development framework, but which really kind of offered an opportunity for a lot of social justice actors working on perhaps slightly different issues to really come together under one umbrella. So both with an international perspective on overseas development, but also kind of internal to Ireland, and also trying to incorporate the environmental movement. The event was called Setting Goals for Better Ireland in a Just World, and it was facilitated by DOCUS, our umbrella of international NGOs, the Wheel, which is a network of domestic social and community voluntary organisations, and Claiming Our Future. So there was, this was trying to kind of create a vision of what we all want to see and where we can collaborate and make our recommendations for, as I mentioned, the post-2015 development framework. So that's kind of just one example of what I mean when I say about building domestic constituencies and I suppose building a domestic narrative on well-being and perhaps on sufficiency of consumption, so drawing the linkages between, development in the north and underdevelopment in the south, if we want to put it that crudely. But again, I suppose just to kind of maybe draw a quote from the research and building on what Bernd mentioned about, are we being radical enough? Are we actually posing these difficult questions in our own societies? And a quote from a research participant in our Leading Edge 2020 research kind of talked about economic growth and quality of life will become increasingly divorced from each other in our developed economies and societies in coming decades, and that we need to find a way to reinstate the concept of well-being or flourishing within a more holistic view of development. Now, some of the conversations associated with that type of discourse are quite challenging, and maybe it's slightly new ground. But yeah, hopefully does that kind of answer your question?
Well, that's up to the public also, but I think it did. And now I can see that Anna Rosa Calde is online again.
Hello. Yeah, thank you.
Now, Anna, can you please come back? You have the opportunity now to give some of the comments about the longer term and what should then be our key concerns, because you didn't have the opportunity before. So now is your go.
Okay, thank you. No, just to add up on some of the issues that my colleagues already mentioned. So 5 years is short term. If we are just planning our agenda, looking at the next 5 years, we will miss the train. So we have to look at the longer changes. I agree that it is a paradigm change. And for me, the two main elements are two things that my colleagues have said already. The development frame that is changing, so we have to go into all deeper questions, and the political structure of our world that Olivier mentioned as well. In that sense, I would like to add up that I think there is a process that is very important for all of us that is going to change the lives of our roads and the citizens' roads as well. Is the big change that the state is the role of the state is taking place. It's a big change. States are not anymore the ones who are capable of answering back citizens' demand. They don't have the political space to make decisions about most of the policies that relate to citizens. So this is a big change for all of us who have been born in an international world. And the second element, I think it is the concept of public. What was considered public in a world where states were the main political actors is going to change deeply in the coming years. So these two changes are going to affect a lot the kind of world we have to build in the new global era, and the role that CSOs should be playing. Just to finish on this, I think our main role in the future will be exactly the question of the next topic in this panel: to build the global citizenship, and this means mainly to work on issues of participation and accountability with new political institutions that will be global, will be local, and will have to be linked among themselves. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bernd, you should have the opportunity to reply to that, because your key questions are raised, and that could also carry us on to this issue Anna mentioned. Is building a stronger global citizenship a priority, actually?
Actually, I don't have the answer, but this global citizenship, this word is a bit tricky, because when we look at what gives, for example, poor and vulnerable communities a hard time, that these are local struggles. What creates change? It's at the local level. It's the immediate action. It's the action in the immediate environment, which is very important. So global citizenship is not easy. I think it's also for many people in the world not an easy thing, because they are disconnected from this globalized world. They are marginalized. So my point here would be, we need to rethink our relations with Southern civil society, and we need to rethink, as Selina said, our relation with other society groups in our home societies. So it is, for example, not really a good development that we, as development NGOs, in the past were mainly focused overseas and forgot a bit to build strong alliances at home with local initiative, with trade unions, with environmental groups. So I think this issue of a transformation of society, this issue of a new paradigm, is a major opportunity to be at home, connected with other constituencies, with other groups, and with our own supporters. At the same time, it's a major opportunity to discuss this new kind of narrative also with our colleagues in the South, who are less and less recipients of financial resources from donors. They are more and more autark, independent actors for justice, for rights, for development at home in their places. So I think the time is to build global communities of change, I would call it, where organized actors build stronger links and work together for the changes we want, and less in this, we give money and you receive money, we support you in your struggles, in your poor country with all the difficulties. I think here we need to kind of have a bit of a mind set change. We need to discuss how we really would like to work, as I said, with others at home and with our colleagues overseas.
I can see that our listeners, they actually have some questions touching upon this. I will just put forward 3 questions, and you can see how you will want to answer, because they are quite much touching the same story. The first question comes from Martin, saying, how can we do different public advocacy to get this message across? And what is the core of our new story? And that perhaps relates to the overall picture. Whereas Blondine Bugnol asked more concretely, how do you as panelists envisage linking up with European socialist CSOs? And then Rodriguez asks, what do you think is missing to reach the effective participation of people and the civil society in general in this process? So coming from the overall picture and down to actually what to do.
Whom are you asking?
Yes, well, who is willing to give a good answer?
I can jump in it.
Very good, Olivier.
Indeed, I'm back. Sorry. Um, I believe the starting point, but of course nobody has a crystal ball, but the starting point should be to go back to the millions, and I really believe that there are millions of local experiences, work, innovations. Most of them are innovations that people, communities, civil society organizations have been on their own, sometimes with the support of institutions, but on their own initiative have been experimenting over the last 30, 40 years. There is plenty everywhere in the world. You take, even in under war situation, at local level, you feel people that struggle with a lot of difficulties, but find solutions to solve their problems. And I think the way to do politics differently should be really to create an enabling environment for civil society actors, for citizens, for movements, communities. And this is really not the approach today. Institutions believe that they have the solution of the problem of people. We need to change totally the logic and the mindset. And to start, for me, this is what means something NGOs write everywhere, you know, people-centered agenda. It's to start the story by what people are doing. And it's very rich. You can take any region in the world, any sector of society, and you will find innovative thinking and experience. So that should be the start. But local and small is beautiful is not enough anymore. We know that from the 70s. So the question is then, what kind of institutions do we need to scale up and to link those local innovation across the borders, across regions, and across the world? And again, sorry, I'm not here representing a view of Concord, but my personal view is that the old institutions do not fulfill anymore this function. It doesn't work. And we might need to invent new institutions, much more multi-actor, much more linked to the flexible, organic ways of looking at things today in the 21st century compared with the kind of centralized, top-down, old way of setting institutions, which is an heritage from the past centuries. So in a way to be creative, institutions are no more and no less than tools that societies create to defend the common interest of a population, of a community, of a country, or of a region. Okay. So I think those are perhaps the ways to start our new story. Back to people and feeling self-confident to set new institutions.
That's quite an ambition also, but just before coming into the more tricky questions perhaps, Selina, could you say what would be the advocacy you should do to get this message across?
Yes, I think as it's great to hear the engagement from people who are listening, and I think there raised some very valuable points. I mean, we're all aware that we feel like a vibrant, strong and free civil society will be essential for transitioning to a more just, equitable and sustainable society, but the challenges are very real. I think we mentioned this idea that the localization of struggles, so to speak, but I mean, from our experience across 27 countries, Trócaire is witnessing how hard-won gains towards democracy and recognition of and respect for civil society activities in space are really vulnerable to threats at the moment, and that's particularly so the case for those who are working to challenge injustices. So the more effective you become essentially at this type of advocacy, unfortunately the predominant kind of powers will work more to entrench that, and there will be judicial, legislative or extralegal threats against civil society. So I think there's definitely real contextual challenges to it. And then in terms of engaging the public imagination, there are also huge challenges, and I think because of some of the failures or shortcomings of multilateral processes at which a lot of our advocacy is focused, people don't feel so motivated or feel particularly overwhelmed. We actually posed this question recently to Professor Mohan Munasinghe, who's a Nobel Prize winner and Professor of Sustainable Development, who was speaking at our 40th anniversary conference about types of public advocacy that can really motivate people to get engaged in this type of transition. And he did mention that, in feeling that there's inertia at the global processes, we still need to pursue those, of course, but to really motivate people, it's about giving them the sense of they feel empowered to live the values of social justice in a way that's more meaningful than the collectivism, if you like, of online mobilization, but building on this momentum that we have a collective global social movement. So he kind of gave a tangible example, which is something like local communities, city council or schools, etc., adopting something called the Millennium Consumption Goals. So I think there's a sense that, we do need to start from scratch in many ways, but we also need to build on existing initiatives where they exist and build momentum in that way.
Anna, you had a reply to some of the questions as well.
Just to add up a small element. I think we are talking about building new institutions, new political institutions, and helping to build them, and ways of participating, trying to go back to people. And I think we need new alliances for that, even to have a new advocacy renewed role. We need new alliances with social movements. We need to break with the idea that we are a CSO development sector, and have a broadened dialogue and connection with CSOs that work in other fields. I think we have to build a big alliance with human rights organizations, and just to add on with these ideas, and to be brief. So new alliances is part of this big change.
Okay, that was one halfway specific recommendation to build new alliances in order to move forward on changing the overall what you would call system, if I can use that very used word. But Bernd, did you want to add something to this perspective before I bring forward some difficult questions from our participants?
Just one little thing. All this change in the way we engage with people and with the world, it has to go with internal change. We have to change our structures. We have to change the way we are managed from within as CSOs, and we have to change as well the skills that we have. So for me, the paradigm change means not only a change in our mission, but also an internal change in our organizations. And to do that, we have to be open.
Okay. Bernd, you are going to have the word as well. Oh, we can't hear Bernd. Bernd? Are you there?
Just a second. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. Sorry. So I agree with Anna that there is an internal transformation necessary. But let me start with you asked for where are these spaces, for the new kind of also alliances, etc. I think we have, for example, one example is for me the World Social Forum, for example, where we have a major diversity of development NGOs, social movements, local and global initiatives coming together, a very rich environment that requires us to go also where our partners are, where people who are in the middle of social struggle. We we working in Northern Development Organizations, you know, we are coming from a very comfortable perspective. You know, we are sitting here, we are advocating for justice, but we do not really take any risk. When a partner, for example, working in Brazil or working in Guatemala or in Peru or in other continents and countries on the same issues like me, these partners take a certain risk. You know, there's oppression, they are called terrorists, they are marginalized in their societies. So from my point of view, we need these links, close links with our colleagues in the South, also to protect them, to build with them alliances on a leveled playing field where we belong to one community, what I called earlier a community of change. This makes it in a way safer for them, and at the same time it challenges us to get to what Anna mentioned, towards a transformation of our organizations. We need to allow us to be challenged by other perspectives, to bring them into our alliances, because we ourselves, how we are socialized in societies which were the last 3 decades only determined by GDP growth, by wealth, which were not really involved in struggles. We can learn so much. Look at South Africa, look at Brazilian colleagues, look at Bolivia with the first indigenous president, look at many other places where people were really in the struggles. We can learn so much from them. Let us open the door and build a different way of collaboration.
Okay, thanks a lot. Let me bring forward some of the questions from our participants in the world. I think Lilia comments, it's not a question but a comment, that we should perhaps bear in mind that we have no Southern partners on our panel here, and this is actually missing in our conversation, and I don't think any of us can disagree with that. Am I right? There are practical reasons for why we haven't managed so, and fortunately there are going to be lots of Southern voices in the further debate and live during the General Assembly of the Concord. As to the question, one participant comments that he would like to ask and comment on the narrative. And as he sees it, there's a need for a clear and double target policy change. And in his opinion, the most important are: 1, raising the effective tax of T and Cs; 2, broaden the narrative to support and include social enterprises; 3, to tax or discourage the travel allowances for officials and focus on modern tech instead, like this one; and open governments and open aid, the need for data and honest research into what works and what not. This is pretty tangible and concrete. Would these kinds of replies, starting from the bottom up, would that be something you would advise? What do you think, Olivier?
Okay, let's talk briefly about taxes. I've heard a proposal that very concretely suggests that we address in a better way transnational business model and the way they avoid to pay taxes, which is at the core of the EU summit that took place yesterday, mostly among our European leaders on tax havens. So this issue that came for the last 10, 15 years from few, unfortunately, but very active civil society is now on the loop in the agenda because of the crisis, because of the context we know. Someone, perhaps Bernd earlier, was talking about the values. We can spell out few values that should be the core of our story, and certainly solidarity is one. And the other one is sharing the power between men and women, sharing the resources, sharing revenues, and finance is certainly a value that we need to go back to. And from my perspective, taxes are a kind of institutional expression of those two values, solidarity and sharing. And taxes today, if you do a survey across the globe, became a negative perception. Everybody wants to pay less and less taxes. If a country, as mine in France, is reaching the 50% of GDP that goes to taxes, then it's criticized by everybody, all institutions, society, political parties. So at the end of the day, I think that beyond making sure that transnational pay their duties in terms of taxes, I think we should go back to citizenship to explain why paying taxes is a very important leverage and tool to make the values, solidarity and sharing a reality for people. I stop there, but I really think that we should challenge the current paradigm around taxes.
Okay.
Just to build on that, Morten?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Yes, on the issue of taxes, I think that I agree that we are through a very similar process here in Spain regarding the issue of taxes. And we need as well not only to work with citizenships, but to make sure that institutions that will handle taxes that are collected will be transparent and will have a clear target. So if we think of global taxation, the global taxation movement, then we have the whole agenda should have three legs. One is the political process of being able to levy the taxes. The second is to work with citizenship and with people to make them understand and committed to the importance of levying those taxes. But third is to ensure that when that money is collected, goes through institutions who will invest that money in a transparent way on social policies or policies that really try to resolve and to answer back people's problems. So it's an issue that has to be handled at the three levels simultaneously, in my opinion.
Do the panelists agree? It seems so.
I mean, just to add, I think this is, for example, the whole tax issue, as Olivier and also Anna now outlined, is also a success story. I think this is something where we did a pretty good job. We had a vision for a different, more transparent financial system, tax system, long before actually we had at the political level a discussion about it. So I think this idea, this is what I mean with also be transformative, to think about a political context, a new paradigm, in this case a financial paradigm, long ahead, so long-term thinking, and then developing approaches, activities like calling for financial transaction tax, like working with others in the tax justice network, which brought now all this data to the light, where many of us were involved. So I think here is a good example of what I mean with, and we did it in alliance with, for example, trade unions, some political parties, and others. So very diverse context. I think this tax issue is a very good example where we did a bit of a kind of job what I would like to see more in the future.
Just to add on that, I agree with Bernd that this is a very interesting example of how we can really make it. But I also think that this is only the beginning of this issue. So it took us around 15, 20 years to put on the table of on the public debate this issue, and to make it real, it might take as well longer time. So this will be a constraint that we have. If we really want to build a new narrative that is transformative and a new kind of political engagement in the world change, then we have to work very long term but in a world that is based on very short-term decisions. So I think this is a constraint that we will have if we want to work on deep long-term changes, that we have to manage at the same time the immediate and the long-term, and don't lose the perspective if we want to be successful.
And so let me pick up from there, Anna, because you're touching upon this very hard issue, which can move us into the perhaps the hard talk. You mentioned that we have a fast-moving agenda just in front of us, and on the other hand, you also mentioned that we need systemic change. You seem to all agree that we have a need for a paradigm change. But one can also ask, we've had 40, 50, 60 years of development debate, and suddenly we find ourselves in need for re-engaging with our societies. Did we fail doing that over the last 10 years? And if we did fail, how can we just expect to reconnect? Isn't that what we're trying all the time? What do you think, Selina?
Well, probably as one of the people with lesser experience, the youngest, I don't know if I can say concretely that all prior activities failed, but I think certainly in terms of obstacles in getting to this point or prior challenges it's been, I suppose there's lots of evidence of the agenda and language of social movements advocating for social justice being co-opted in the past. So powerful political structures tend to be very good at co-opting dissent and not actually having that lead to transformative change. So there may be smaller concessions, but not the radical overhaul that has been required. And that's often, but not exclusively, but often is a function of lack of political will and perhaps failures to learn lessons of recent and previous crisis. So I suppose some of the shortcomings of multilateralism, like having to re-articulate principles that were agreed 20 years previously at Rio +20, might be, very frustrating for some and show the inadequacies. But it also just sort of shows the scale of the challenge that we face, the dominance of the current narrative, and its ability to reinforce status quo and power imbalances. That said, I don't think that it's an insurmountable challenge, perhaps because of the depth of converging crises now. It seems like hopefully that's a bit of a wake-up call. But yeah, it is a challenge. Again, to kind of quote a respondent from a private sector participant who engaged in our Leading Edge survey, they kind of encapsulated the fact that we had lost public mobilization or motivation around these issues as being a case of, the scale of the challenge and the nature of radical change that's required to overcome them can lead to kind of denial or apathy or a sense of people feeling overwhelmed or paralyzed. And climate change would be the big one that for people outside the activist circle, it seems to become one of those things that, they prefer not to think about because it's such a big challenge. But I think there's also evidence of huge successes, and we should try and build on those and feed back on those and use positive examples, feed those back to people that have been involved in social movements. And it just puts even more of an emphasis on us to provide an inspiring narrative.
Okay, so we got ourselves another challenge as well, providing and establishing a very good narrative, which again can foster this development. But Olivier, you mentioned that we need to create an enabling environment, something which can move forward the debate, not only but also the paradigm shift, and perhaps even create new institutions. But how are we going to do that? I mean, let's be practical. What's the short-term actions that we can actually do to start this process rolling?
For the enabling environment for civil society, I think there is a few elements which are back to basics. it's a little bit difficult to believe that in the 21st century, first of all, the political space for civil society is under threat almost everywhere, including in Europe. And this fight for recognition by institutions, political parties, that citizens have on their own right the possibility to organize themselves and to say and to tell whatever they want, it's still a fight to win. If you see, for example, and I'm sorry, but I want to be namely talking about Sweden and Canada, for example, just to talk about so-called developed country, that's how decreasing the level of funding from government for advocacy activities, it's reflect that even in Europe, the political space is shrinking. And not talking about many developing countries, conflict areas where this basic right is under struggle. So enabling environment starts with this. Then this is the kind of defensive agenda. Then there is a more proactive agenda, which is what make civil society organization working and delivering their objectives in the best conditions. And there is no one single response. In every country, depending on your legal environment, financial environment, political environment, the answer might be different. But the point is to sit, we should be in a position to sit with institutions, with lawyers and with parliamentarians and Congress people to elaborate conditions that boost the work of citizens. Exactly the same way that private sector has been lobbying for decades, which is an enabling environment for business. And we should dare to ask the best condition for citizens everywhere to do what they believe need to be done. And that would certainly leverage and scale up some of the micro local initiatives that we sometimes are a little bit limited to. So that's two ways of, I think, leveraging an enabling environment, which is good for civil society.
Thanks, Olivier. Along these lines, Martin is asking, should we leave our role and safe positions as CSOs and enter the political arena? What do you think, Bernd?
I think we are in the political arena. And maybe Olivier's example of shrinking CSO space, if I want to read it positively, this negative message, it could be an indicator that we are touching on the right issues more and more, that we are getting closer to the core. We are getting closer to, let me give you an example. Our corporations, our companies exploit natural resources via mining in almost all developing countries and also at home in our countries. So there is a major exploitation of natural resources on the cost of the environment and on the cost of people. And there's a struggle against it. Alone in the country of Peru, we have at the moment about 60 social conflicts. In Guatemala, where the Citizenship Alliance is addressing this issue of extractive resources, we are now called one of the major donors for terrorist activities in Guatemala. So shall we be proud of it or shall we be scared? It's a good question for CITSE, and we are discussing these days how to deal with these allegations. So I think allegations in itself can also be an indicator to that you touch on the right issues. So what can we, so we can learn from it that we need to take this space for CSOs very serious, because as I said earlier, other people lost their life for this kind of work, so we need to be careful also with our partners to be to think through what we do. Secondly, we need to go into these root causes of poverty, and this is also very important. And here's a bit of a litmus test with a view to the post-2015 agenda. Will we mainly lobby for ODA, for money to secure our institutional development work, or do we really work hard, for example, towards a post-2015 framework, sustainable development goals, future development goals that really go into these major questions. How can we live, as Olivier said, how can we live in dignity in the future, worldwide, within planetary boundaries? This is a really important issue. And
And what is your question to that? Or your answer, I mean?
My answer is that I think, for example, we need to find these issues which are the change maker. And I think, for example, the extractive industries issue is a very interesting issue where you can explain how the capitalist system, how exploitation works, how injustice, inequalities. You can talk about planetary boundaries. You can talk about climate change and how we deal, how on what is our economy based, our fossil fuel and carbon-based economy. So I think we shall not only talk the big picture, the financial system, the capitalist system. We need to go into very concrete areas, but they need to have a transformative character. And I think that is the future challenge for us, to identify a few key areas and to do this work in a way that it has this change maker dimension.
Okay, thanks a lot. One of our listeners is asking how we can use this crisis we are facing right now and this new media situation, the citizen awareness for the present agenda of building a new ambition for the development sector. What would be your reply to this question, Anna?
Thank you, Morten. I will answer the question, but just I would like to add a couple of points to the previous discussion. Regarding the enabling environment, I think that also as CSOs we can add on something. I think the enabling environment is not only our environment is not only built by how governments or other actors determine the rules we are going to work or restrain our political space. I think that we can also do things that depend on ourselves. And my point is that I believe that we need more cohesion and integration among CSOs in order to create a more powerful environment to achieve our goals. And I believe as well that we need stronger networks. The way we have been building networks, it was again a model based on an international world. So in a way, our organizations have to become more global, and our networks as well. So I'm in favor of uniting, mixing, merging, integrating CSOs structures. And regarding of the issue of becoming more political, I think, of course, the answer is yes. And this also means, on top of the issues that my two colleagues raised, that we have to be willing to take risks. And risks of being clear about certain issues that might be polemic, not so much politically correct as sometimes we are in our public debates, and the risk also of identify very well people or political actors that are responsible for what is going on, because the chain of political responsibilities in the global world is kind of blurred. Sometimes what is going on in Peru might have also direct responsible person or institution in our own society, just to give an example. So we have to be more accurate in identifying those responsibility chains, and then take the risk of challenging them and facing them. And this will connect what Brent was saying, that sometimes our partners in the South take a lot of risks, and then we are here sitting in our chairs, not really feeling so risky. But if we really get into the political, then I am sure we will face in those risks. And and about the question you asked me, how can we use this crisis and this new media and citizen awareness for our agenda? I think is a very good opportunity, at least in those countries where we have now a strong new social movements, because the political worries that those movements put on the public agenda are very similar to the ones we have had, but they are expressed in a very clear, straight way. So it's definitely an opportunity. And how to use that opportunity is the big question, because of course it is not easy. First, they are social movements, they come and go, they are very fluctuant. Second, they are not structured as we are. And then we have also felt this distance when they came up, being the center of the political debate in our country. So I don't think it is easy, but I would say that how can we try to connect with these new social movements? First, we have to listen. This is very important. We cannot go there with the answers or knowing how to do. We have to listen. Second, we can start participating in some of those social movements as individuals. And this is maybe a very postmodern way of connecting, but I think also this is a characteristic of these social movements. And I think also new information and communication technologies open for us a broad new way of engaging with these new social movements. I will let it there. If you want to ask me later, I can try to go more in detail.
Sure, but time is running very fastly, and perhaps we should think of winding up, because we've been going on for a little more than an hour, and I would like to invite you and also participants to have some concluding questions, and it would be very interesting, I think, to see if you have actually listened to each other, because we all have all these ideas in our heads, but what did the others say? And actually, if you were going to identify a couple of things, 1, 2, or 3 most important things that you will start on tomorrow, and keeping in mind what did your colleagues say, what would be the most important thing that you bring back after this debate? What do you think, Selina?
Okay, well, I think I mentioned already that I was very struck by the initial question that Bernd posed, is, are we radical enough at present, and can we be brave enough to be radical enough in the future? And I suppose then later in our discussion, some of the examples that he provided around that, in terms of, you know, are we just going to sustain, you know, certain policy tracks that we have in place around ODA and the maintenance of INGOs, or are we going to really radically engage with a new agenda, not just as part of the post-2015 development framework discussions, which might be quite limiting, but in terms of an alternative space for discussion around a more equitable and sustainable model of development. I also think I heard a lot reflected in the need, and this would, just to move into my own kind of reflections or summing up points, I think there would be kind of mainly 3. And the first would be, we've all mentioned that we need to model the change that we want to see, starting with our own organisations. And I think that's sort of especially in relation to the environmental and sustainability concerns. The second one I would have would be, we've all touched upon in various guises, talking about building linkages with a wide range of civil society, including domestic actors and environmental movements, in order to strengthen cooperation across social justice advocacy in Europe in its wider sense. So that really requires a deep engagement with culture as kind of an important component of sustainable and equitable development. So recognizing that, you know, really in terms of the dominant narrative as it is at the moment, there are very strong public policies, commercial inducements, global media images that are vigorously promoting a model of development that isn't within environmental limits, and how do we really engage on a cultural basis and engage with that? And then, so kind of, I suppose my third point would be around, in terms of the new political and inspiring narrative, we need to consider the balance, perhaps, and it's related to this issue of radicalism and, you know, our roots as global justice and human rights organisations, that we need to consider the balance between insider and outsider approaches, if you like, in advocacy. So we still need to avail of opportunities to negotiate and political opportunities, but not to ensure that we're not just, you know, co-opted in or participating and sucked into kind of tick box consultation processes. So we need to strike the appropriate balance between, you know, a more meaningful and deeper local and mobilising type of engagement, and that's not just in protest, but constructively in terms of kind of adopting alternatives ourselves at a grassroots level and you know, using the possibility of growing alternatives. So we certainly have a huge challenge ahead to kind of come up with a new political and inspiring narrative. But I think there is lots there to work with. And I would kind of finally reference again around some of the kind of discussions in the finding frames, because I think, you know, our ability to make this meaningful for people outside of this particular discussion is what's crucial in going forward.
Thank you very much, Selina. We'll keep note of that. Bernd, what do you think? What would be the most important thing you heard and that you would take on as from tomorrow?
To me, the most important point made Olivier with a view to people's solutions. I think that is particularly for our partnership work, our development work, that's a very, very important starting point. But it's also an important starting point with a view to the frameworks, the political context, including the post-2015 debate. For example, Troker did a great research with local partners on this question. What do they expect from a future framework? What do they see as crucial to fight poverty and to work for justice? And many of them said, and our exclusion, our discrimination, the exclusion and discrimination of women, of small-scale farmers, of poor communities. I think the major point for the future is to actually try also to release marginalized communities from all the burdens they are carrying. So that is I think a very important point that needs to count wherever we work. The second conclusion from my point of view is this balancing between being professional, learning from using the skills we have developed over the past years, how to influence politics, etc., to do evidence-based work, but also to find a bit back our roots as social actors. And I think when you go into a development organization and you ask staff, why are they working there? I think there is a very personal, very high commitment, but sometimes we lost in our ways of working to really encourage people and to give people the space to be the social actor also personally, and so that our organizations can become in the future again actually more a kind of social actor. I think many of us were during apartheid, during other struggles, real social actors, and I think we just need to re-explore this potential to be, as I said earlier, also an actor that has a transformative, prophetic and inspirational role in our societies and in the collaboration with our partners. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. A very beautiful phrase. Ourselves as a potential transformative actor, and we're utilizing this. Anna, what would be the 3 points that you would like to wind up with, and what did you hear from your colleagues that you would like to bring on?
Yeah, thank you. I will take from Selina this idea that we should build on some of our successes. So we have to face a new world, but we have some strengths that come from we have been doing that is valuable and is our threshold, is there. I will take from burn the idea that is also useful for today, that the communities of change, really investing in building those communities and seeing our work as communities of change, because I think we are, all of us, doing in our development work this kind of work, but it's looking at them as communities of change. I think is a very valuable idea as well. I would take from Olivier something that is more medium term, but because all these understanding our successes, working with the idea of communities of change, it has to be connected with a broader long-term agenda that is mainly political and is very much related with changing our political institutions in the whole world. From the local, how our political institutions are at the local level, and how they will be at global level once they are built and they become global. And then this, I will join it with the idea of the new narrative that has been mentioned by all of us, because if we really want to engage in long-term change, it's true that we need a strong narrative that can connect with people, that we have to, I will take this from, that has to handle with the tension between today and the future, and how to manage these two levels. And finally, that requires from our side inner changes in our sector, in the way we are structured, in our skills, and in the way we see we manage our organizations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, Olivier, as a representative of Concord and of a lot of European NGOs, you have the last word in this round. The same question goes for you, but I'd like to add one. But what on the first hand, or on the one hand, what would be the things that you would hear from your colleagues and carry on for tomorrow, the most important ones? And on the other one of our participants is asking that, or commenting that the enabling environment is actually a new narrative coming from the EC. And we could also question this term. Should we develop our own term, or should we actually take it on as our term as CSOs? What's your reflection on these two questions?
Yeah, on the first one, I see a lot of convergence among the four panelists or participants to this debate today, perhaps too many, up to the people that are listening to us, that we might be perhaps one-size-fits-all way of thinking, but I like this convergence because I believe that 10 years ago, we were very far in the leadership of the sector to reach that kind of more political discussion and to get consensus on it. And I think this is a good step forward. I won't quote again the different concepts that Anna, Bernd, and Selina just wrapped up very eloquently, but I buy in fully and will try to bring those issues to the General Assembly of Concord in 2 weeks' time. Before going to your second question, Morten, allow me to mention something that we have been evoking, but perhaps not explicitly enough from my perspective, which is the importance of still investing in global citizenship education, in public awareness, in really educating our decision makers and the people in a nice sense, and not a kind of school approach, considering that we know what should be done and then we'll tell people, but in a way educating together and reaching a view of the reality of the world. I'm astonished every time to see how illiterate we are regarding the state of the world, about the way the real economic system globally work. When I talk to people who are not part of our sector, with examples, facts, evidences, you just don't believe me. And I think we need to increase dramatically the investment on this sector. Back to your then final question about the enabling environment. First, to start with, very difficult to translate, at least in French. I don't know, Hannah, in Spanish, but I think it's also something which is really, there is an Anglo-Saxon approach in the enabling environment. But on the other hand, I don't believe that this is coming from institutions. It's the response that from Busan, institution have been giving to a demand that we have been pushing for 10 years minimum. So the way we talk about it might be, could be updated, could be transformed. But what we mean with that, mainly from my understanding, is we want institutions that serve the people, that serve the actors, not institutions that tell people and actors, including civil society, what to do. And I think this is what is hopeful with this enabling environment approach. We discuss with institutions about what they can provide to support the work we do and the initiatives we take on our own right everywhere, at every level in the planet. I think this is a kind of mindset shift for institutions, I guess.
Thank you very much, Olivier. I think it's coming to an end with this webinar, and so we should thank our participants all over the globe and for a very active and lively chat. Excuse us for not having taken in all the questions and comments, but hopefully this will not be the last webinar that Concord is holding. Thank you also to 4 of you panelists, and just to say that now we are doing this political narrative, well, and you are also part of this history now, because this is one of the first steps that is going to feed into this narrative that you are co-creating together. You have all mentioned that this is about establishing a deep new engagement with our societies and rethinking our relation with it. Rethinking our paradigms and creating new ones. We've got some quite substantial input here today for ways to go forward, and I know that Concord is going to work on this issue over the last over the next couple of months to consolidate this during the planning phases of Concord in the next years or so. So this is not an end point, it's a starting point rather, and this input will be taken into consideration in the Concord General Assembly. And if there's something you would like to add as participants, please also be aware that there's a link for everybody available on the website, and it should also be possible for you to access this video on the website. And just I want to check, is there anything we want to add from your side? We should highlight it now, dear panel.
Thank you, Morten, for sharing, and thanks for organizing a low-carbon debate. Nobody had to travel to this debate. It was great.
No cost.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and for the next time and for a very new, nice political narrative.
Thanks, Morten. Thanks, Nicolas. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye, thanks a lot.